For anime-only viewers who haven't read the Solo Leveling light novel or even the manhwa, well, this is gonna sound wrong, but Sung Jin Woo versus the One Piece verse isn't even close. Guys, I'm not exaggerating here. When people talk about hydrogen bomb versus coughing baby, this is it. In this video, I'll go through everything the One Piece world has to offer, and I mean everything, including dead characters like Joyboy, Ryuma, Roger, the ancient weapons, whatever. Naturally, I'll also talk about the idea that if a certain power can be imagined, it's very possible that someone, somewhere in the One Piece world has that power. For example, let's say that there's someone with a plasma fruit, a logia that transforms the user into plasma, the fourth state of matter. That'd be straight up broken, cause plasma can generate temperatures of millions of degrees, create controlled fusion reactions as attacks, and manipulate electromagnetic fields for both defense and offense. And it's not just this. I'm sure all of us can imagine devil fruit ideas that would just straight up feel wrong. Maybe a concept fruit, or an entropy fruit. The possibilities are endless, and we're gonna keep all of this in mind as we talk about why and how exactly Sung Jin Woo versus the One Piece verse isn't even close. Starting with the current peak of power in One Piece, we've got Luffy, Shanks, Blackbeard, the Admirals, Loki, Five Elders, the God Knights, Dragon, Mihawk, and Imu. Guys, these characters aren't weak at all. In solo leveling, the strongest hunters apart from Sung Jin Woo are called national level hunters because their power is comparable to that of an entire nation. And when you think about how just one burst of haki from Shanks can knock out 100,000 fodder, it's fair to say that characters like Shanks are on the same level as national level hunters in solo leveling. But there aren't many characters in One Piece who compare to Shanks, and even fewer who are definitively stronger. Based on the overall lore, we can assume that Joyboy, Imu, Endgame Blackbeard, and Endgame Luffy are above Shanks. Meanwhile, characters like Zoro, Mihawk, Roger, Whitebeard, Dragon, and Akainu are going to be the same tier as Shanks or slightly above depending on the context. Even so, the total number of characters in One Piece history who can match national level hunters is probably fewer than 100. And then there's also Imu, an immortal entity who has the power to bestow immortality and esoteric powers to their puppets such as the Five Elders. And let's not forget the ancient weapons like Pluton, Poseidon, and Uranus. Pluton is capable of destroying entire islands in a single shot, and Poseidon can command all the sea kings in the world. And while we don't know what Uranus can do, it has to be at least on par with the other two, especially if it's the weapon that Imu used to completely destroy the Lelouch Kingdom. Now, with all this said, the peak of individual power in One Piece seems to be island-level destruction, with the reality wrapping within a limited area, and potentially planetary if multiple powers are combined. But what does all of this mean in the face of Sung Jin Woo? We know that national-level hunters like Thomas Andre were nothing in comparison to even the weaker monarchs, and we know that Sung Jin Woo went on to defeat every single one of them. He defeated them and absorbed their armies into his shadow army. And how many soldiers do you think Sung Jin Woo has in his shadow army? When he absorbed the previous Shadow Monarch's army, his shadow soldiers grew to 100,000. These included soldiers like Belian, BERU, and Igris, who were many times stronger than a national level hunter. But want to take a guess at the number after he took out the Monarchs and the Titans? It's at least 10 million shadow soldiers, with an emphasis on at least. Of course, the great majority of them will be fodder, and it's easy to imagine that 100% haki outbursts from someone like Joyboy or Endgame Luffy could wipe out a couple 100,000 of them at once. But keep in mind they have limitless stamina and perfect regeneration, and if they get knocked out, they can just get up again. This means that unless Sung Jin Woo himself is taken out, it'd be theoretically impossible to stop the shadows, even with ancient weapons. Though, speaking of defeating Sung Jin Woo, is it possible? Can the entire One Piece verse somehow work together and pull it off? Well, Sung Jin Woo is immortal, so killing him isn't an option. However, considering there's no limit to the type of abilities a devil fruit can grant, it's possible the One Piece characters might find a way to seal him. Especially because Sung Jin Woo himself doesn't have any of the three applications of haki. This also brings us to the Logia question. Logia users are elemental beings who can become, create, and control their element. They're intangible unless you use haki or exploit their elemental weakness. However, it's very likely that Sung Jin Woo's shadow abilities would bypass Logia defenses entirely, as they interact with souls and essence rather than just physical matter. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that Logia users could maintain their intangibility against him. What then? Well, I'll be straightforward. All Sung Jin Woo would need to do is create a few shadow soldiers from armament hockey users, and the Logia users would instantly become fodder. Even if it's someone with a plasma fruit or an entropy fruit, a shadow soldier made from Zoro would do him in. To add more context, originally when Jinwoo created a shadow soldier, they would lose a portion of their power, but after becoming the Shadow Monarch, their weakness disappeared. Now, all of his shadows retain the full strength and abilities they had when they were alive. If someone like Garp or Whitebeard were turned into shadow soldiers, they would be in their prime. Alright, now I'm going to talk about the true scale of Sung Jin Woo's power, because not everyone has read the light novel or the manhwa. Just so that we're all on the same page. Then you'll understand how the One Piece verse really isn't even close in comparison. The Absolute Being then created 8 fragments of brilliant light and 8 monarchs who were then fated to fight each other till the end of time. The fragments of brilliant light got tired of it and decided to kill the Absolute Being. They succeeded and became rulers. Now, not all of the fragments of brilliant light were in on it. For example, the most powerful of all fragments was against it and had to fight the other fragments, but he lost to them and was reborn as the Shadow Monarch. We're talking about the previous Shadow Monarch, Ashborn. He joined the Monarchs and it became Monarchs versus Rulers, and the cycle continued until the battleground became Earth. This is where a system was designed to create a vessel for Ashborn to descend onto Earth, and a player named Sung Jin Woo was chosen. But instead of just making him his vessel, Ashborn was impressed by him, and so he decided to make him the next Shadow Monarch. Since then, Sung Jin Woo has surpassed all the monarchs and rulers, and he's at a point where no one in his verse can threaten him. He's become death itself, and the only opponents he has now are the absolute beings of other universes. And the same goes for his Shadow Army. They're all insanely strong, especially the Army of Destruction he absorbed after defeating Antares, the Monarch of Destruction. And we know Kamish was an extinction-level threat that can wipe out the entire planet. Now imagine hundreds of dragons that are even stronger. In the end, the scale is just completely different. Now, for One Piece, it operates on a planetary scale. Even the most powerful characters are at best island or continental threats. The ancient weapons might be planetary threats if we're being extremely generous. But Sung Jin Woo operates on a universal scale. The only way to say that Sung Jin Woo versus the One Piece verse is even close is if we assume that Imu's immortality is something Jin Woo won't be able to handle. But we gotta understand the fundamental difference between types of immortality when comparing these characters. From what we know in One Piece, Imu appears to be immortal in the sense of agelessness. They've lived for centuries, possibly since the Void Century. This is due to the eternal youth operation of the Up fruit that was potentially performed on him, similar to what Doflamingo wanted Law to do. This type of immortality prevents aging and natural death, but doesn't necessarily make one unkillable. So here's how Sung Jin Woo would handle Imu's immortality. We know his shadow extraction captures the essence or soul of his victims, so even if Imu can't die in the conventional sense, their soul or essence could still be extracted and added to Sung Jin Woo's Shadow Army. Remember, his shadow extraction works on a metaphysical level that transcends conventional physical limitations. But even if Imu's immortality somehow stops shadow extraction, Sung Jin Woo still has plenty of options. He could trap Imu forever in a random shadow realm where immortality wouldn't matter, or he could simply throw Imu into space, like Joseph did to Cars and Battle Tendency, and Imu would just eventually stop thinking. In the end, the answer's clear. Sung Jin Woo solos the entire One Piece verse, and it isn't even close. Now, what if I told you Sung Jin Woo versus the Jujutsu Kaisen universe also isn't even close? Watch that video here.